Just sharing it on 2 more platforms and we will be good to go. I wonder what time we expect Mitchell to knock on the window.
Oh, if it's not on there, probably.
I don't see him on here yet, so.
It's 7, so it's probably another 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Wind's pretty windy. Yeah, it's gonna affect his pickleball game. The wind. Outside? Well, yeah, unless he's inside. We usually be outside. There's a place over like Bogart. It's a church. Church
No, there's other places for pickleball. But
outside?
you're slightly outdated, but that's okay.
Oh.
Was there use real pickles?
Okay.
In the ball.
We are done sharing the class on all the platforms. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone had a meaningful Memorial Day. I hope everyone had a meaningful Shavuos. And we are in Parshas Nasai. It's the second week in a row that we are studying the portion of Nasai, because last Shabbos we had the Deuteronomy reading for the second day of Shavuos. So in the Chumash that we use, the live Chumash, we are on, I guess we'll start at the bottom of page 841. So we're talking about the dedication of the tabernacle, and Mitchell's online, so you don't have to look at the window.
No.
He just joined. The dedication of the tabernacle is specifically the first time used, the dedication of the altar, of the Mizbeach. So the altar, there was an external altar in the courtyard of the tabernacle, and that was the copper altar. And then there was the Mizbach Hazav, the golden altar that was in the holy section. The golden altar was the one that had the incense offering, the Ketorah's offering on it, and the outside one is the one that had the animal sacrifice. So when it was time to inaugurate the Mishkan, there was each of the tribes had a leader, and the leader of each tribe brought an inauguration offering that was exactly the same, which is why when we read it in Shul on Shabbos, it's going to sound, let's just say, a very speedy reading, because every rabbi and every Baal Korah, every Torah reader that has read those verses, it's exactly the same verses, same words, exactly the same words, except for the name of the tribe in the beginning. Other than that, it goes very quickly. What is that offering that we read 12 times? So we're at the bottom of 841, where it says dedication of the altar. It says the leaders, charitable mood led them to bring offerings for the dedication of the altar on the day it was anointed. So they were in a good mood. They were charitable, so they brought this offering. The leaders presented their offerings in front of the altar, but Moses did not accept their offering since he did not receive an instruction from God to do so. And then, because Moses was hesitant, he had no idea, was he supposed to take it to him? It was a voluntary thing. God said to Moses, one leader each day should present his offering for the dedication of the altar. So one tribe per day through their leader. What was the actual offering that they brought to dedicate the altar? And that's on top of 843. And we're not going to read all 12 of them. We're just going to read the first one, and then we'll discuss it. The one who brought his offering on the first day was Nachshon, the son of Aminadav of the tribe of Judah. His offering was, and here we go, 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, 1 silver sprinkling basin weighing 70 shekels according to the shekel measurement used for holy items. Both bowls were filled with fine flour mixed with olive oil for meal offering. So you had 2 bowls, both filled with flour and olive oil. 1 spoon weighing 10 gold shekels filled with incense for the incense offering. 1 outstanding young bull, 1 ram, and 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering. 1 young male goat for a sin offering, for a peace offering, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 male goats, and 5 lambs in their first year. This was the offering of Nachshon ben Aminadav. Every single one of the 12 tribes, the leader of those tribes brought this exact same offering with the exact same silver, and the exact same spoon, and the exact same animals, times 12. What's up with that? In other words, why 3 of this and 2 of that, and why this amount and that amount? Now, you say, listen, one guy donated that amount and everyone else just followed suit. So the first guy, Nachshon ben Aminadav, brought his offering. It was this exact, for whatever reason, this was his concoction. And everyone else just followed and brought the exact same thing. But obviously in Judaism, we don't accept that. There's a reason. There's a reason for everything, even the numbers, the weight, the items. And if you just read these verses, like many people do, especially in non-Jewish communities, you take right? If you ask an average person who's not Jewish, who reads the Bible, you take out a Bible from Alabama and you start reading numbers, you're like, okay. You ask them, tell me, excuse me, why did the spoon have to weigh 10 shekels, not 11? And why did the basin have to weigh 70 shekels, the sprinkling basin, and not 71 shekels? You think they're going to have an answer? You don't have to be a rocket scientist, by the way. All you have to do is have Rashi. What I'm about to tell you, the first thing I'm about to tell you, the reasons for all of this is not Chassidus. So we're just starting off with basic Rashi. So Rashi, the 10th century prime commentary on the Torah, quotes from Moshe Adarshan. Moshe Adarshan, we believe, lived in the same era as Rashi. He was a rabbi in Narbonne, France. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's how it's spelled. I don't know. I'm not a French I don't know exactly how to say it. Narbonne, but it's in the neighborhood over there in southern France. And he quotes from Moshe Adarshan, who says as follows. And it's actually a very long Rashi, but it's worth every word. So Rashi says like this. He starts with the first thing. The first thing we read was 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekel. Rashi says, silver bowl, minyan oisiyosa begematria, the sum of its letters in gematria. So if you take the word karas kesef and you use the numerical value of those 7 letters, karas kesef, it's 930. Right? Karas kuf is 100, ayin is 70, resh is 200, tuf is 400. So you already have 4, 6. You have 770, 770. Then you have kesef. You have chaf is 20, samach is 60. So it's 80, and pay is 80. So it's another 160. So how much is 770 and 160? 770 and 100 is 870 plus 60. How much is 70 plus 60? 930. So the first amount, the karas kesef, that word is 130. Why 130? Corresponding to the number of years of the life of Adam, the first man. So the first component of the offering of the leaders of the tribe was karas kesef, a silver bowl, that the Hebrew words are the numerical value of 130, because that part of the offering represented the unique individual that was Adam, the first human being created by God. Then it says that it weighed 130, right? 930 was the word karas kesef, the silver bowl. How much did that silver bowl weigh? It weighed 130 shekel. So Rashi says, what is 130? Because when Adam established offsprings for the perpetuation of the world, he was 130 years old. So we have now not only a remembrance and a correspondence to Adam on his own, but there's a unique part of the leaders of the tribe offering that was reflecting the unique moment where Adam not only was a person for himself, but when he had offspring, creating new individuals, bringing new human beings into the soul, obviously with Eve, with his wife Chava. So the first part is Adam in general. Second part is Adam bringing children into this world. And then it says, Mizrak Echad Kesef, which in English is one silver sprinkling basin to sprinkle the blood on the altar. What's up with that? Says Rashi, the word Mizrak Echad Kesef, those three words, one silver sprinkling bowl, is the numerical value of 520. What's 520? So here we have a representation for Noah. Noah and the great flood. You remember Noah? So we had Adam and his gift to the world, his children. Now we have Noah, who was 500 years old when he had his own offspring. He gave birth to his children when he was 500. Again, back then people lived much longer. And so why 500? Why 520? If he was 500, what's the 20 about? And 20 is because that is and because of the 20 years that the flood had been decreed before the birth of his offspring. So we want to remember Adam before the flood. So where God said there was going to be a flood, which was 20 years before his offspring. And then the fact that he was 500 years old when he gave birth. So we have great manifestation, great representation of Adam and his life. We have great representation of Noah and his life. And then it says, the next thing on the list is Shivim shekel. How much did that silver sprinkling basin weigh? 70 shekel. Why 70 shekel? Says Rashi, corresponding to the 70 nations which emerged from Noah's descendants. Right? Because everyone else in the world was destroyed. Only Noah and his family survived. So there were 70 descendants, 70 nations that came from the offsprings of Shem, Cham, and Yafes, the three sons of Noah. Everything you know today in the world, all 70 nations are an offspring. They come from the children of Noah. So we have 70 to remember that. Then he says, we have one spoon weighing 10 gold shekels filled with incense. So Rashi says, one spoon, that's corresponding to the Torah that was given from the hand of the Holy One, blessed be He. There's oneness, there's unity. It came from one God. Why 10 shekel of gold? Why 10 gold shekel? Says Rashi, 10 gold shekel corresponding to the 10 commandments. Why was it filled with incense? Here it's very, right?
Why gold?
That's a good question. Why gold? Well, I'm guessing that because now we're talking about the Torah, we've upgraded. Meaning we had silver for Adam, for Noah, they were nice people. But now that we have we're referring to the ladle of the Torah that God's giving the Jewish people, we put in the most esteemed metal, which in this case would be gold, much more than silver. Then it says it was filled with incense. And here it gets interesting. Ktoros, the word in Hebrew for incense, is 613. Except it isn't. So then how do you make that work? So Rashi says it's 613 as long as you substitute the dalet for the kuf. So if you keep it as a kuf, ketoras, kuf, tes, reish, tuf, then you have a problem. Because then it's not 613, then it's almost over 700. But if you take the kuf, the first letter of ketoras for incense, and you swap it with a dalet, then it's 613. So dalet, tes, reish, tuf is 400, reish is 200, so it's 600. 600 and a tes is 9, 609 plus 4, 613. But how can you just swap it sounds a little, if you remember, and this is only if you remember, and if you don't, I actually will not hold it against you. But I did share this in a class once, or maybe it was a sermon. So at least some of you were there. There's in mysticism, right? You claim to be an expert and you say for Yitzira, you love reading books about mysticism. So maybe you read this. In Jewish mysticism, there's different ways to connect letters. And one of them is called Atbash, which is you take the Hebrew alphabet, the 22 letters, and you put them vertical, and then you start from the top, from the last letter going down. So the aleph and the tuf are interchangeable. So the first and the last letter. The bays and the shin are interchangeable. The gimel and the reish are, the gimel and the Gimel and the Resh are interchangeable. The Dalet and the Kuf are interchangeable. So it is considered in the world of Jewish study and Jewish homiletical interpretation and mysticism, there is this concept called Atbash that I studied in 4th grade. We loved it. It was very entertaining. Something different, something unique. So if you take the Kuf and swap it with a Dalet, Torah's incense represents the aromatic smell that is represented in the 613 commandments, except to get to that number, you go through Atbash, and that's what Rashi says it for Ramosha Adarsh. Then it says one young bull, actually in the Rashi, one out.
Is there a Ditoris? A word Ditoris?
There's no such word.
No such word?
No such word. But you're swapping the Kuf and the Dalet. And they have a swappability according to Jewish mysticism.
But it doesn't affect the word.
No, not the way it's pronounced. No. Then you have the one young bull. Rashi says that's for Abraham, the founding father of Judaism, because he also took a calf to bring to the angels. So the bull here is connected to him. Then it says one ram, that's for Isaac. Remember, he was bound almost like a ram, and then we had to substitute him with a ram. One sheep is for Jacob because he was very busy with the sheep in Laban's house, so that's a reflection of him. And then it says there's a he-goat. Everyone needs to mute themselves. The he-goat represents an atonement for selling Joseph when they put the blood of a goat and they came to their father and said, oh, he was eaten by a wild animal. And then it says at the end, Rashi concludes and says, and for the sacrifice of a peace offering, 2 cattle, right? So you had the burnt offering, you had a sin offering, now you have a peace offering, and right, because you're inaugurating the altar, you want to have a representation of all the different types of offerings. He says, for the peace offering, 2 cattle corresponding to Moses and Aaron. So they were represented in this inauguration. Why them? Why were they connected to a peace offering? Who made peace between Israel and their Father in heaven. They were the spiritual guides that helped the Jewish people stay in line so they can have a relationship with their Father in heaven. So that's why they bring peace offering. And then he says, rams, he-goats, and sheep. There are 3 varieties. Corresponding to, why do you need he-goats, rams, and sheep, and lambs, says Rashi? Corresponding to the Kohanim, the Levites, and the Israelites, the 3 types of Jews. Or corresponding to the Torah, prophets, and the writings. And why do we have 5 of each? 5 he-goats, 5 rams, and 5 lambs, says Rashi. There are 3 sets of 5 corresponding to Torah. Corresponding to the 5 books of the Torah, the 5 commandments on the first tablet, and the 5 commandments on the second tablet. And this is from the teachings of Rav Moshe Hadarshan. This is all in one commentary of Rashi on one verse. In other words, every single aspect of this inauguration, altar inauguration offering was precise. The measurements were precise. The particular animals were precise. The particular segment of animals were precise. Because in Judaism, nothing is by coincidence, nothing is by mistake. There's a reason for it. And as becomes clear from Rashi, that this inauguration offering of the altar was there to uplift all the generations of humanity, of goodness, of righteousness that came before, were all uplifted. From Adam to Noah to the Torah, to God giving us the Torah, to the many aspects of the Torah, to the founding fathers of Judaism, to the story of Joseph and his brothers selling him. So many parts of Jewish history were included in the precise expression of this offering. That's Rashi. No.
Anybody else have a different commentary?
No. But when you study Rashi, it becomes very clear that part of the offerings of the part of the offering that the leaders of the tribes brought were representing parts of human history prior to the building of the tabernacle. Adam, Noah, his descendants, the patriarchs, Joseph, Moses, and Aaron. But then part of it represents the 10 commandments, the 613 mitzvahs, the 5 books, the 5 commandments on each tablet. So it seems to represent all different aspects of human/Jewish reality and history. So we have a couple of questions, and not real deep questions. They're just observations that we need to assess so we understand this Rashi better and then understand what it means for us practically. First of all, Rashi seems to make a split, to make a cut, right in the chronology of, he's doing Adam and Noah and Noah's kids and the 70 nations. And right before he gets to Abraham, he makes a cut and he says the spoon represents God giving us the Torah and the incense is the 613 mitzvahs. Why split between Noah and his descendants and Abraham, which Abraham, by the way, was also one of Noah's descendants? Why split in the middle and bring the Torah in at a time where the Torah wasn't yet given? The Torah was given later. But yet the first mention of the Torah in the offering is between the descendants of Noah and Abraham. Smack there, he mentions the Torah. Number two, why is there a need in this offering of inauguration to have two things that represent the Torah? The ladle, the spoon, with weighing 10 gold shekel, which was full of incense, which represented the Torah, the 10 commandments, the 613 mitzvahs. But then later at the end, when you bring the rams and the he-goats and the lambs, there's 5, 5, and 5 representing the 5 books of Moses, the 5 commandments on the first tablet, the 5 commandments on the 7 tablets. Why do we need to have two total separate parts of the offering, parts of the gift representing Torah? What was wrong with the first part that we needed the second part? Or what's wrong with the second part that we needed the first part? And yet Rashi found it important to explain to us that there was two separate manifestations or representations of Torah in the offering of the tribes as they were inaugurating the altar. And third observation, Rashi says that the he-goats, the rams, and the lambs have two meanings. They can represent the 3 types of Jews, Kohanim, Levites, and Israelites, and it represents the Tanakh, the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, the Ksuvim. Why do we need 2 interpretations? I was sitting at an appointment today preparing for class, and I was like, this is a good chap. In other words, Rashi is delicious on its own. I think what Rashi is telling us is how everything is so precise, which is so important in a world where everyone thinks just round it out, round it up. No, there's precise for everything. There's a reason for everything. That's delicious in itself. But the Rebbe is taking it a step further in volume 18 of the Rebbe's edited talks, and he says as follows. When you talk about the offerings of the leaders of the tribes, you can divide it into 2 categories. Category number 1, the offerings that are in the first 2 verses, which are coming from the inanimate and from the world of vegetation, right? The world is divided into inanimate, vegetation, living organisms, and then human beings. And then, of course, Chassidus explain, then there's the Jew. But in the 4 general categories, inanimate, vegetation, living beings, animal kingdom, and humans. So the first section of offering, it talks about the silver and gold vessels and spoons, it talks about flour, it talks about oil, it talks about the meal offering, it talks about the incense. That's all from the inanimate and from vegetation. The second half of the offerings that the leaders of the tribe brought, the following 3 verses are from the animal kingdom, for the sin offering, for the burnt offering, and for the peace offering. And the truth is, these 2 concepts of offering, from the inanimate vegetation to the animal kingdom, represent two stages in development in the concept of offerings. Before the Torah was given, before there was a tabernacle, so before Sinai, before the Mishkan, there were offerings. But those offerings, right? Adam brought offerings, Noah brought offerings. Many people before the giving of the Torah brought offerings to God. But those offerings did not have the ability to bring divine energy and allow it to permeate the physical world, to bring holiness and holy vitality into the physical world. And therefore, they were only from vegetation and inanimate, because vegetation and inanimate don't have the same life force and vitality that an animal or a human has. So therefore, being that it represented a part of human history in which offerings existed but did not have the ability to bring vitality into the physical world, they came from a part of creation that also does not have as much vitality as the other parts of creation. Once the tabernacle was erected, once the tabernacle was established, now offerings had a much deeper power. Now, when you bring an offering, you can actually create a vessel for divine presence to manifest itself in this world. That's why there was a fire that came down from heaven and would eat up the offering, would swallow, would burn the offering. The fire came from heaven, which means you have the ability to make real change in the physical world. Therefore, the offerings that represented that part of our history came also the sin, peace, and burnt offering that the leaders used in the inauguration of the altar also came from the animal kingdom by human beings, bringing it from the animal kingdom because it had more vitality. And that is also the truth about Torah itself. The two stages in the Torah's development. What do I mean by that? The Torah in itself, the Torah's essence, as it was given by God's hand to us, is way above the physical realm. Doesn't have the power to permeate the physical, mundane, material world. So it ends up becoming sort of aloof and disconnected from this world. It was only after Sinai, right? The Torah existed before the world was created. The Medrash, the Zohar and the Medrash say, Alpayim Shana Kodma Torah L'Olam. There were 2,000 years before the world was created that God already had the Torah. Now, whether that means physical years or that it existed in God's essence before the world was created, but the Torah predates humanity. It's the blueprint for creation. So the blueprint exists before the building. Unless you're in Mexico and New York, where they build without the blueprints, and then we find out about it later. In most parts of the world, you need the blueprint first. So the blueprint for creation was the Torah, which means the Torah existed even before we got it at Sinai, way before, and before we had the ability to permeate the world with its vitality, just like those offerings that existed prior to the Torah being given, prior to the offerings being brought in the tabernacle. It was only after the Torah was received by the Jews at Sinai. Now we have the ability through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs to bring that holiness into the world and make it a living vitality. And now we can understand the order of the verses. The first two verses that talk about the bowl and the basin and the golden spoon, those are referring to the offerings that are from the inanimate and from vegetation, and they represent life in this world, spirituality prior to the giving of the Torah and prior to the building of the tabernacle. Therefore, it refers to the generations that existed before God made a special covenant with the Jewish people that changed everything. So we asked before, why was there a cut where the Torah is mentioned in between Noah and his descendants and Abraham? The answer is because by the time Abraham came around, yes, the Torah wasn't given yet, but the foundation for what eventually would become the Jewish people, Abraham was the first Jew. God made a special bris, a krisis bris, a covenant in the book of Genesis with Abraham, which means there's already a new development in the relationship that's eventually going to lead to the giving of the Torah, which will allow us to permeate the world with physicality. So right when we're done with Adam and Noah and his descendants and the 70 nations, there's a cut. Ladies and gentlemen, please be introduced to the Torah. There's this concept called the Torah. And because of this Torah, God made a covenant with Abraham, which started a process that eventually led to a more energetic world where godliness and holiness can be permeated, where physical objects eventually could have total holiness, like a Torah scroll, like tefillin, like a holy book, like a mezuzah, like tzitzis, things that become holy. Now it's alive, just like animals on the altar are alive. They come from the animal kingdom, and therefore they have more vitality. Suddenly now the opportunity that we have also changed from Abraham going forward. And eventually that led to a higher level of the Torah, which was when we accepted it at Sinai. And that's kind of the reason for why we mentioned the Torah twice, once in the beginning before Abraham and once later, because there's also the Torah when you could start allowing it to really play out in real life, where suddenly now it's not just in theory, because by Abraham it was just, we're going to have this incredible thing, but it hasn't fully permeated. That's why the only mitzvah that Abraham was able to do where he had physically permeated holiness was his circumcision. You couldn't take tefillin or any of the other physical stuff and make it holy. But after we got the Torah at Sinai, suddenly we have Rashi mentions the Torah again in the offering, because now we're talking about the Jewish people who received the Torah and the ability that they have to transform the world, themselves, and everyone around them in a state of holiness for the better through acting upon those mitzvahs. And that's a whole different animal even than Abraham, because now we are able to do that on our own. And that's why when it talks about the Torah before Abraham, it just says the one spoon. Because in God's world, the Torah is all one. When you start seeing differences, Kohanim, Levites, Israelites, the Torah, the writings, the prophets, Torah, prophets, and the writings, that's already after we received it. And we are physical people. We are physical people that have division and have separation. And therefore, suddenly you see different numbers as it plays out. And the truth is that in 1966, in a separate talk, the Rebbe honed in even more on the end of Rashi, where Rashi says that the peace offering had two calves, what was the word over there? He said two oxen, 5 rams, 5 male goats, and 5 rams, 5 male goats, and 5 lambs. So, but Rashi says interesting language. Rashi says the shloisha minim, there's 3 types. What do you mean? You just mentioned 4 types. You mentioned bull, rams, he-goats, and lambs. And yet when he divides them up in Rashi, he says there's the two oxen, which represent Moses and Aaron. And then there's the lamb, he-goats, and rams, represent either the Israelites, Levites, and Kohanim, or the 3 parts of the Torah of the Tanakh. Why does Rashi separate the oxen from the other 3? It should say 4. There's 4 items here in the peace offering. In the peace offering department that the leaders of the tribes used to inaugurate the altar, there were 4, not 3. The Rebbe said as follows. When you look at the Kohanim, Levites, and Israelites, those are 3 types of people, Jews, who complete each other. Not everyone needs to be a Kohen, not everyone needs to be a Levite, not everyone's going to be an Israelite. Each one serves God in the spiritual journey that they're meant to do. The Kohanim do their service, the Levites do their service, the Israelites do their service. You bring them all together, it's a shlomim, it's a peace offering, because when they all do their part, there's peace, meaning they've completed the peaceful reality for the Jewish people. But the first 2, which are Moses and Aaron, the two oxen, that's not optional for one type of Jew or the other. Every Jew, whether you're a Kohen, whether you're a Levite, whether you're an Israelite, whether you're a Torah Jew, whether you're a prophet Jew, whether you're a writing Jew, whatever your interests are, every single Jew needs to have those 2. And that's why Rashi doesn't include it as part of the 3 types, because it's not part of the 3 types. The 3 types are, depending on who you are, that's where you fit in. But the first 2, the 2 oxen that are part of that peace offering, represent Moses and Aaron, which means the Jewish leaders that every single Jew needs to have in order to guide them spiritually and allow and help them become closer to Hashem. So that's why there's a separation. Now, Rashi, the Torah, obviously in Judaism, we're not Christians. We don't believe you need an intermediary to connect to God, and we don't believe that anyone of flesh and blood, anyone that looks like a human, thinks like a human, was once a human, was born to a human, was born to one human versus 2 humans, all the stories you want to say, one father, one mother, no father, one mother, no father, whatever concoction you want to come up with. We don't need or want intermediaries. We believe in monotheism. There's one God and one God only. But Moses and Aaron play an incredible role for the Jewish people, and that is to help the Kohanim, to help the Levites, to help the Israelites, to help every type of Jew who is seeking to have a healthy relationship with God, to get the right guidance, to get a spiritual boost, to get a dose of inspiration, to get a dose of upliftment. Moshe Rabbeinu did it his whole life. He went from tent to tent, from neighborhood to neighborhood in the desert in Egypt to try to inspire and uplift the Jews. And Aaron certainly did. He brought peace between people. You needed him. Was he an intermediary? No. He was a Moses. And everyone needs a Moses in their life. And everyone needs an Aaron in their life. Moses was a tough cookie, because to be a leader, you need to be a tough cookie. You can't play the whole politically correct game. Aaron, his unique role was to bring peace. So he played a more softer role, a more sensitive role, a leadership role, but a more sensitive one. And we couldn't have Aaron without Moses. We couldn't have Moses without Aaron. We needed both, and every Jew needs both. And that's why Rashi separates them, because when we're inaugurating the altar, it's not enough just to represent the history and remember the history and remember the Torah and remember the commandments and remember the various divisions within the Jewish people. It's also important to remember that to have proper representation before Hashem, Jews need to have healthy leaders. Leaders who will be like Aaron and be sensitive and soothing and comforting and soft. And you need leaders that are going to be like Moses, who are going to kick butt and knock you into shape whether you like it or not. If you don't have someone in your life spiritually, I have someone like that. And unfortunately for me, I don't need to go out of my house for that. Meaning if I misbehave spiritually, or if my thought process is not so I have a spiritual master in my house named Chavi and get knocked back into shape. But sometimes we both don't know what the right thing to do is. That's where you need Moses. That's where you need Aaron. You need to have people in your life that are connected to the Rebbe who can give you guidance that is soft and tough at the same time, who can love you and comfort you and also put you in your place. And without that, we all fall apart. The idea that just because you don't need an intermediary means you don't need to have leadership is a mistake. We don't want or need an intermediary, but we do want an intercessor. Go look that up. It's a fancy word. An intercessor, someone who's there to uplift, to inspire, to help us, to boost us, to lift us up. Who has that whip, like when you're going horseback riding and someone does zets to the horse and the horse goes faster. You need someone in your life that tells you to get off the couch and stop wasting your time, stop bemoaning your life, stop being a kvetch. Get your tuchus off and do what you got to do. Doesn't mean you don't have a rough day. Of course not. That's why Moses and Aaron are there, to comfort you and say, yes, it was a rough day, and now it's tomorrow. Get up and do something. And this incredible offering that each one of the 12 tribes brought, which means it's accessible to every Jew because we're all connected to every one of us is connected to one tribe or another. We all have that opportunity to connect with this inauguration on this most deep, beautiful level where every detail matters, every representation matters, and where each of us ends our day and ends our offering with a recognition that we can't do it without Moses and Aaron. It doesn't mean you're handicapped. It doesn't mean that you are a loser. It just means that you're a physical human being seeking spiritual fulfillment and spiritual drive and spiritual journey in a world that's very, very physical and materialistic, full of temptations and evil. And you need someone to say, Bubala, frask, knock you in the face, and get back with the program. Have a wonderful night. Be inspired. Be uplifted. I am uncertain where my being will be next Wednesday night, but I shall keep you posted if we are on duty or not. Wishing you a wonderful week. Go to Shul. It's the longest Torah portion of the year. Go to Shul so you can hear the longest Parsha. It does not mean the sermon will be shorter. It just means it'll be long. Everything will be longer. And we'll see you then. Sei gesund. And if you're in Bozeman, Mitchell, where are you? Still here? You're not here. You left already. Your phone died. Your phone something. There's a tomorrow night, the Mensch Club. Come be a Mensch with the